Good morning everyone. I am Eureka Berago, BS in English 1A. Today my topic is all about language shift and death. Let's proceed to overview. First is what is language shift and death. Second, factors that affecting language shift. Third, types of language death. Fourth, consequences of language shift and death. And the last is summary. First is what is language shift. When I heard this lesson, I was kind of confused. What is the difference between shift and death language? Language shift happen when a group of people start using another language instead of their native one. This may occur because of social, cultural, or economic reason. Language shift is displacement, abandoning and shifting your language, but it can happen rapidly and slowly. To summarize all language about language is when the language is not usually used already. Like you are into the use of language, but you can learn a new language, so you will shift to another for that betterment. For betterment communication to the people that you are communicating with or to communicate with the community. For example, a community might speaking indigenous language and switch to English for better job opportunities. Here are the factors of affecting language shift. The first one is demographic factors, moving to a region to another country. There are 4 factors that affecting language shift. I hope you can see it in the screen. The first one is demographic factors. Second, attitude or value. Next is economic factor, and the last one is political and social factor. The first one is demographic factor is moving to a region or another country may cost or one of the great costs of language shift, because when you learn, just like example, I will give you an example. In a large group of people from a rural village speaking a minor language like Quancha in South America move to an urban area where Spanish is dominant. They may gradually shift to speaking Spanish frequently. This happens to integrate socially, find jobs and access education, leading to a decline in their native language use over generation. The second one is attitude or value. Negative attitude towards the language. Of course, it is when there is a negativity on your inner self toward your language. Basically always happen in ethnic when they showcase their language, their unique language, and then they use another language for them to build in. The next one or the third one is economic factor, encouraging language decline. Most economic factors influence language shift when people adopt a dominant language to access better job opportunities, trade, or financial growth. For example, in many non-English speaking countries, individuals shift to English to increase employability in multinational companies. The last one is political and social factors. Usually happens in multilingual countries So influence language shift when governments enforce the use of an official language through policies in school, administration, and media. Social factors such as social individuals may adopt a dominant language to gain social status or fit into urban or elite communities. So let's proceed to what is death. What is language death? So language death occurs when a language is no longer has any speaker. This often happens after a language shift, where people completely abandon their native language. So, so no longer spoken. Last one of the world to use language or cease to exist. So, for example, for the language death it is the extension of Cornish language in 18th century. So let's proceed to type of language death. So the first one is gradual death. Gradual replacement of a language. So gradual death occurs when the language slowly loses in speakers over generations as they shift to dominant language. This typically happens in multilingual societies where the younger generation adopt the dominant language for better social or economic opportunities, leading to the native language's decline. So the second is sudden death, extinction of the language. So happens when the language stops being used very quickly because something bad happens, like a war or natural disaster. This can happen if the people who speak the language die or are forced to leave with their homes. So the third one is radical death, when the community stops speaking the language. So radical death happens when people stop using their language because of political or social pressure, even though they are still alive. They might switch to a dominant language to avoid discrimination or to fit into society. So the last one is bottom to top death. The language ceases to use in a conversation. So bottom to top that happens when the language stops being used everyday conversation but continues in special settings like religious ceremonies. Over time, people may only remember the language for traditional or formal purpose. So let's proceed to causes of language shift and death. So the first one is migration. People adopt the dominant language after moving to a new region. Migration can cause language shift when people move to a new place and start using the local language instead of their native one. Over time, their original language may be forgotten, leading to its death in that community. So the second one is globalization. Trade, media, and education promote the use of international language like English. When people start using widely spoken language like English for business, travel, or education, as a result, smaller language may be abandoned and eventually disappear over time. So, the third one is government policy. Some governments favor one language for national unity, ignoring minority language. So when people start I'm sorry for that. So when officials promote a national or official language in the school, media, and work, making people stop using their local language over time, this can lead to a death of smaller language as people abandon than for the official one. So urbanization, city life, encouraging the use of widely spoken language for work and communication. So when people move to city and start speaking the dominant city language to fit in to find work, as more people use the city language, their original language may be forgotten and eventually die out. So the last one causes is the cultural assimilation. People may abandon their native language to fit into the dominant culture. So when people adopt the language and custom for a new people to fit in the better, over time, this can cause the original language to replace and eventually disappear. So let's proceed to consequences of language shift and death. So one is loss of cultural identity. Communities lost their tradition and values when their language disappeared. So second is extension of traditional knowledge. Valuable indigenous people about nature, medicine, and customs fades away. Third is reduce linguistic diversity. The world becomes less diverse in language and communication style. Fourth is weak community bonds. A language help build relationship and its loss may be create social division. And then the last one is educational challenges. Native speakers often struggle in schools that use dominant languages. To summarize it all, language shift and death occurs when communities abandon their native language in favor of dominant one, often due to factors like migration, globalization, government policies, and cultural assimilation. This leads to loss of cultural identity, extension of traditional knowledge, weakened community bonds, and diminished linguistic diversities. Educational challenges also arise as native speakers struggle with dominant language. Protecting endangered language just is crucial, as language is not just a communication tool, a living repository of language, culture, and human creativity that should be allowed to vanish.